I can't simply ask you what you think about it. We need, I think, to be a little bit more nuanced than that. But if this isn't the correct or the best available policy, what is? 0345 6060 973. I think, and you may even disagree with this, you can, of course, disagree with every single thing that I say on this programme, and it couldn't be easier to do so in public. You just ring the number. But I can't think of a better policy at the moment. I could perhaps tinker at the edges of the rule of six. I think, probably see some sense in the Scottish and Welsh decision to exclude children under 12 from the list, which would at least change the prospect of Christmas for many families. How many nuclear families, how many families of four are going to have to make a decision about which grandparents they spend Christmas with, when previously, up until this morning, you'd been expecting to spend it, if you're lucky enough to have all four grandparents with you still, you were expecting to spend it with all of them. You're going to have to make a decision as things stand if you want to stay within the law. So I have huge problems with how they handled the outbreak at the beginning. Huge problems, huge and abiding problems, and some of them continue. There's the BBC journalist Secunda Kamani has just secured a remarkable freedom of information response, which sees Patrick Vallance apparently reporting that he'd been told off by Chris Whitty for calling for the lockdown to be brought in earlier. But all of that can wait for the public inquiry. What we will concern ourselves with today is a gentle question about whether or not you like it. And if you don't like it, I will very politely and warmly encourage you to come up with a better idea then. Okay? So let's kick it off there. 0345 6060 973. I can't think of a better way of doing it. The problem, I think, from the beginning, and I do want to talk about civil liberties. I haven't quite got myself inside the heads yet of people who really feel affronted by this, but it's a widespread feeling, so we must at least acknowledge it. People who feel that they're being in some way oppressed, suppressed, or repressed even. The idea that this attempt to promote public health, this attempt to minimise deaths and infections, is somehow not a price that you're prepared to pay for the indignity of having to wear a mask, or the indignity of not being able to have 7 people at your barbecue tomorrow night. I don't quite get that, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. It might well mean that you're cleverer than me and you've seen the light while I still languish in the darkness. So I like that question. Well, what is so awful about this? If the police start rounding us up, and goodness knows how they're going to do that, having been filleted by 10 years of austerity, if the police were to start coming down on us like tons of bricks for the crime of gathering in 7 or 8s as opposed to 5s or 6s, then I could see a fairly serious problem on the horizon. But I don't know about you, and coppers will be particularly interesting on this question. I don't know about you, but I just don't think they will. If you ask yourself who you would grass up, okay, and maybe we need a better verb than that, actually, to properly reflect the issue. If you asked yourself, in what circumstances would you tell on somebody? Now, I am going to suggest to you that there are 2 of you. There is a duality at your core that you are not always entirely honest about. You don't always admit. So in my case, there's a 48-and-a-half-year-old father of 2, but there's also a 14-year-old who's never grown up. There's a duality at my core that I am comfortable with and occasionally perhaps not entirely honest about. So my 14-year-old self would dob you in if I didn't like you. So I wouldn't be deciding to dob you in because of what you'd done. I'd be deciding to dob you in because you nicked my girlfriend 6 months ago. Do you see what I mean? And you might not like the neighbours on that side, but you really like the neighbours on that side. They're both having a barbecue come the weekend, but you're only going to dob in the ones you don't like on that side rather than the ones you do like. Do you see what I mean? That's the problem often with calling upon the public to inform upon each other. So we'll leave that one hanging, that curious duality at the heart of us all. Will you do it honestly, or will you actually be a little bit mischievous in your relationship with the hotline, whatever they end up calling it? But the real question is, don't gather in groups of more than 6. The logic of it is clear. The science of it, as ever, will be contentious. There will be scientists who say no. The majority, I think, will say yes. It doesn't seem to me to be a massive infringement. That there is the tension. You know how much I love words. And sometimes if you get the words right, everything else follows. So this, to me, feels like an inconvenience or an irritation. Right? It's an inconvenience or an irritation designed to diminish deaths and infections. It doesn't feel like an infringement. If it did feel like an infringement, I personally would still be happy to go along with it because I don't feel that they're taking away a particularly valuable freedom, the temporary restriction upon how many people I can gather with. But if you do feel it's an infringement, I would really like to talk to you because it's a mindset I don't get.